I have to ask for your indulgence to begin with. I'm a little bit raspy. I've been traveling around Russia and indeed the Donetsk People's Republic, the independent zone, the war zone, if you will, for the past practically 2 months. I attended a scientific conference in St. Petersburg. This was the Ligachev Scientific International Conference organized by the Russian Academy of Sciences and the Russian Foreign Ministry, who were so kind as to invite me there. And I told them that although they might not be aware of it, there is an opposition in the United States. It's not just Republicans and Democrats, but there are also other forces who are willing, making the necessary pragmatic adaptations, but still willing to struggle to put an end to this duopoly of power. But in the course of this, I've got a little bit of a respiratory issue going on, so please bear with me. So the idea is now what to do for 2015 and what to do for 2016. And what we want to invite you to do is look to us, the Tax Wall Street Party, for an alternative in 2015 and indeed, I hope, in 2016. And that means across the board, right, from top to bottom. And we'll be developing those opportunities as time goes on. But suffice it to say, we do not intend to leave the presidency to that collection of 18 fascists on the Republican side, nor will we accept somewhat shop-worn individuals of dubious integrity on the Democratic side. So we would like to focus your attention on this kind of a debate. Now, there we go. However, before I start spouting off about what's going to happen in the immediate future, you have every right to say, hey, what's your track record? Well, if you've been coming here in 2013, 2014, it's now 2015, I've been up here telling you things in 2013 and 2014. And in particular, in 2013, I went back and did a kind of a comparison saying, crash of 1929, U.S. mass strike upsurge, 1936, French mass strike upsurge, 1936, UAW, 1937, sit-down strikes, and so forth. So it was about a 7-year estimate from the beginning of the Depression, the panic phase of the Depression, to a kind of a mass strike echo of that. So in our case, it's 2008 to 2015, lo and behold. And what have I been able to deliver? I would actually say that I have delivered. I've delivered everything except my laser pointer, which is what I need now. But anyway, you get the idea. We have got the mass strike going on in any number of places around the world, including this country, right? This is the Rosa Luxemburg mass strike, right? Look it up. In Greece, we've got, in some ways, a not ideal situation, but an advantageous situation of a mass strike situation with an actual leadership, with SYRIZA, right? So they have leadership, they have program, they have organization. Oh, thank you. They have, thank you very much. They have all those good things. Leadership, program, organization, and a strategy, anti-austerity. So in Greece, we have good leadership. The problem that they have, of course, is that they're a one-country-only operation. And we, as you have just heard, we are not that. We don't want to be that. We want to be here in the United States, but we just launched our first candidate in Great Britain, and we're looking towards Australia coming up, but not just the English-speaking world either. We're trying to get candidates in any number of parts of the world, including the European Union, the German-speaking world, the other southern tier of the European Union, and so forth. In Spain, you've got a mass strike movement, and an organization has grown. That's Podemos. However, the leadership is fishy. We have here a labor journalist who confronted Pablo Iglesias at his appearance here in Midtown at the City University Graduate School, And he said to them, look, you guys are now trading, you Podemos are pretending to be the SYRIZA of Spain in your case, right? Sort of the way we claim to be that of the United States, and I think we can make the case. But he asked the Iglesias character, Tsipras wants to cut the Greek debt in half. He wants to have a new edition of the London Debt Conference of 1953, a haircut for the creditors, 1/2 off. What are you proposing for Spain? And the answer was some mumbling that essentially came down to nothing. And if people want to interrogate us about this, we can respond chapter and verse. So Iglesias is nothing like Tsipras. These are horses of a very different color. Tsipras, good leadership, courageous. Have to admire it. Spain, already giving away the store before he even got into power. No good. So he refused to join Tsipras to request a 50% debt haircut for those European zombie bankers. Portugal, we've now got this bloco de izquierda, or bloco de izquierda, and we just don't know, because this has come on the scene very fast, so we're still looking. But the one that you don't know about, that I'm actually here to tell you about, even with my slideshow, is the Donetsk People's Republic. And I'm astounded when you pick up the program of this event here, the Left Forum. They have Spain, Greece, Portugal. Yeah, wait a minute. What country in Europe has nationalized all the banks in the past 6 months? It's the Donetsk People's Republic. Donetsk, eastern Ukraine, right? The area that has been demonized, right? You think it's a bunch of Russian goons running around in ski masks. No, no, no. These are some of the most advanced thinkers of them all. They've got think tanks in Moscow and elsewhere behind them. So they have nationalized all the banks, and we'll tell more about their exploits. So that's good leadership. Then we've had a mass strike in the black population, the inner city population of the United States, right? Ferguson, Missouri, Staten Island, Cleveland, Baltimore, with dubious leadership. Leadership that has so far been incapable of formulating a single economic demand. Jobs. No jobs, no peace. That's my version of this crisis. And we have a program for that. I've just outlined it in the previous forum. It goes like this. 10 million new jobs for unemployed inner city youth and other poor youth, but unemployed, with preference towards inner city blacks and inner city Hispanics. It's clear. It has to be. And that would then essentially take 10 million people and put them into jobs. And we propose to name it in honor of Marion Barry, the late now Mayor Marion Barry of Washington, D.C., whose hallmark was, back in the 1980s, that any teenager in Washington, D.C. could get a job. And he strong-armed and arm-twisted people like the Washington Post and other rich, powerful, evil entities to come up with jobs. And they had to pay a large part of it, right? So they were anteing up and ponying up. So that's the 10 million jobs. And that actually means 10 million jobs in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Now, you can't do that with the Congress. You could do it by the Federal Reserve, right? Since the Federal Reserve is completely lawless, you could call them up. A real president would call her up and say, Yellen, guess what? You're opening a summer job window at the Federal Reserve with whatever it takes, $1 trillion, whatever. And you're going to do that this week. That could easily be done. Since they operate outside the law, why not make them operate for something good outside of the law? It's perfectly feasible. So what we're trying to do is to relate, well, even before we get to this, I submit that my predictions have been okay, that I actually have caught something going on in the world, right? Greece, Spain, Portugal, Donetsk, and U.S. have all got mass strike symptoms of various levels. Then indeed, I'm trying to appeal to you, I do know what's going on. You should listen to the rest of the stuff I want to tell you this time. So, relate the U.S. political campaigns to the mass strike process going on around us. In other words, it's not campaign and mass strike, but somehow see them together. And otherwise, we're going to have a long, hot summer, and I think we may have all kinds of disturbances, but you don't need to. You could avoid all of that with 10 million new jobs. Harry Hopkins would have been sitting down on packing crates and making phone calls to governors saying, Gov, you get 100 million. You know, hire me 20,000 people or whatever it is. Now look, we're moving towards Donetsk now because this is my new news story. The revolutions of recent centuries, of course, grow from upheavals. They don't spontaneously occur in the midst of placid and tranquil times, right? The French Revolution of 1789 grows out of the American Revolution and all kinds of wars. The Russian Revolution, almost 100 years ago now, grows out of World War I. The Chinese Revolution out of a civil war and a world war. And then Donetsk, the one that you have not been told about. It is a revolution against neoliberalism, oligarchs, and the plans that NATO had of looting the coal mines and this wonderful Black Earth region, the prime agricultural territory in the world. So you've got to expect upheavals and revolutions to be mixed, and that's indeed what we find here. Whoop, what have I got? I'll get back to this in a minute, but oh my heavens, one slide out of order. Well, I think this is, we'll just continue here for the second. This Portuguese left bloc, okay, the head of this is this guy Costa, and according to the London Daily Telegraph, he has 55 measures, including healthcare, education. It is a fiscal reflation package. In other words, he's saying the EU, the Troika guidelines about inflation, or deflation as they put it, are out the window. We want to reflate. We want to roll back labor reforms. When they say reforms, they mean you can be fired. That's a reform. And make it harder for companies to sack workers. You get the idea. So he says, enough austerity. We've got to essentially make a U-turn and go back. So this we're evaluating. This could be another front. And it's extremely valuable because, as was pointed out, the main problem of SYRIZA is that they're all alone in these European institutions. If you get Portugal in there, then it, of course, changes. Now, Greece. We have our wonderful correspondent, Michael Chiotinis. You can hear him every week on my radio program, World Crisis Radio. Talked to him yesterday. He says the Greek government is going to have to make a $300 million payment to the IMF on June 5th. They have a total of 1.3 billion euros that they have to pay during June. They can't do it without a cash infusion. They don't have the money. Therefore, somebody like the German finance minister, Schäuble, the guy in the wheelchair, if you've seen him, he is playing chicken, right? Maybe they'll go over the brink, maybe they won't. We would say they need assistance in the form of a BRICS bank loan, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa now have a bank. They should use it fast. They seem to have very slow response time on this stuff. The BRICS bank would be fine. Russia would be fine. Or the Greek defense minister has actually expressed a preference for the U.S. Federal Reserve to make the loan. And you can do that too with the same method. Hello, Yellen? Make that loan. Because she operates outside the law. So why not? However, the thing that you don't know about is the social revolution in Donetsk. And at the time I went there, about the middle of April, my impression was nobody in the world knew what was happening until I happened to stumble into it. Because the networks are not going to tell you this, but it's going on. And this is the most exciting thing. They have gone farther down the road. They have accomplished more. They're in power, and they're doing these tremendous things. So the timetable, once again, was this. The Donetsk People's Republic declared its independence between April 6th and 7th of last year, 2014. The author of the Declaration of Independence is a guy I count as my friend now, Borys Litvinov, who is the economic genius, I would say, who's doing all these things. And then they had a referendum on May 11, 2014, under the noses of the Kiev fascists, meaning that if you were organizing to take part in that vote, they could easily come and kill you. I just saw a bunch of people get gold medals for courage for having done this. If you want to get a background on Kiev, the Maidan, the Euromaidan, and all the rest of that, I recommend this book, which you can get for free gratis on the internet, Neo-Nazis and the Euromaidan. And these are two people that I know, Kochetov, but in particular, Stanislav Bishek. Now, these are two Russians. They operate in Moscow, and as you can see here, they're from the election monitoring organization of the Commonwealth of Independent States. I've had him on my radio show, and I will, again, as soon as I possibly can. But they've written an account of what this whole color revolution was, right, with Victoria Nuland of the State Department, right? F blank, 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 the EU, but then she gave cookies. Remember her? Okay. This is the exposure. You catch up on all this. And this is this night of hell in February of last year. So there's your background, so that you don't believe in the myths about the color revolution. Now, here is what the new government has accomplished. How about nationalizing every bank in the country? Does this capture anybody's imagination? After an infinite ream of talk, Noam Chomsky, all those books, somehow never added up to a simple nationalization of all the banks. Who has nationalized anything in the last 10 or 20 years, right? Almost unheard of. And this includes the bank of the very aggressive and fascistic oligarch Kolomoisky. His bank was seized, nationalized, and then they said, in honor of you being a very nasty oligarch, you are going to pay the pensions of all the retirees in the country for April. And I have a picture of that in just a second. We'll get to it. So he had to pay the April pensions. The coal industry has been put under government supervision. Every move they make has got to be cleared with a government official. The electrical industry, right, under state control. Railroads under state control. They are creating a new state sector with state-run supermarkets, and I've been in them. I was eating lunch in the state-owned supermarket. Never tasted better until I knew that it was under government control. Okay? Not the cartels, not agribusiness, but the state. So they're creating collectives or cooperatives. You can call them what you want, right? Collective, cooperative. The Russian word is sometimes kolkhoz. Ever hear of a kolkhoz? It was a collective farm back under the regime, the Soviets, right? And there's the building, right? There was a time when this was the sinecure of the world. Everybody, every camera crew, every network had a camera crew looking at the administration building here in Donetsk. So who do we find? First of all, my friend, this is Alexander Kaufman, and he is the foreign minister of the Donetsk People's Republic, Donetskaya Narodnaya Respublika. I went there. This is the first time I was there. He invited me back the second time for the Declaration of Independence anniversary. Here's another guy. This is a very brave military man. Let's just call him General Yuri. General Yuri was part of the security for the government area. And his training, of course, is Spetsnaz of the Soviets, Oman of the Soviets, and then he was the Berkut. He was the riot police of the Kiev government. And as he pointed out, essentially, the interior minister and the Kiev government were simply bribed. There's a scene where Nuland says, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs, Nuland says, you know, we put $5 billion into democratic development of Ukraine. Yeah, $5 billion will buy you quite a few fascists, won't it? So he's been fighting them, and he pointed out, he said that his superiors in the chain of command had been bought, had been corrupted, had been suborned by the CIA, by MI6, and so forth. And that's why, because I asked them, I said, how come you didn't shoot? I actually said, how come you guys didn't just open fire and clear the square? And I said, the New York police, we actually had people from the New York police saying off the record, we would have been shooting at a very early time. How come not you? And he said the chain of command was corrupted by the CIA and by MI6. And we discussed with him what I think is very important, that they're being attacked with phosphorus, they're being attacked with cluster bombs, and I believe they're being attacked with depleted uranium, abidyoni uran, eaten up or consumed uranium. I urge people who are experts in depleted uranium in particular to do what they can to fill this, what seems to be an information gap here. Because remember, these people are not Russian government. This is not Putin. This is not the Kremlin. This is not any emanation of Putin in the way that you've been told. These are highly independent people representing a middle-class mass strike revolutionary movement. So he's one of them. And his call to you, to all of us, was this situation will end when Obama issues the order to Kiev and those fascists to back off, to leave us alone. As they said, they thought that their separation from Ukraine would be similar to the very peaceful separation of the Czech Republic from Slovakia, right? Czechoslovakia into two parts. Why couldn't that be done in Ukraine? Who started shooting? Kiev started shooting at people like him. So he's got the St. George ribbon. Some people have it. It's becoming a fad. So that's General Yuri of the Berkut, and now he's part of the security forces of the new republic. And what he's showing you is a mortar shell casing that was fired at his people. Now, some of the interesting things. They have their own license plates. Now, look, this is not, repeat, not the Confederate flag, okay? This is the flag of St. George, okay? Let's get that off the table right away. And indeed, if you want to know what this Donetsk actually resembles, it resembles the case of West Virginia. Because you'll remember, it's true. Exactly. I mean, the formalism is there. Virginia seceded from the Union in 1861. The mountain counties said, look, we're not those slaveholders down there in the Tidewater. We want to stay with the Union. So they, in turn, seceded from West Virginia and came back to the Union. And this is the origin of West Virginia, a state that actually enjoys a lot of goodwill, right? Everybody likes West Virginia. It's acceptable in the North, the South. It goes all over the place. Okay, so they have that too. And that's their Georgian, St. George flag, not Georgia. That's a different story. Now, how about this one? This says, Первый государственный supermarket, the first state supermarket. By now, they have several dozen. A state supermarket, beautiful, air-conditioned, clean, bright, well-stocked, everything you'd want, right? Competes with Safeway, competes with Giant. What do you have here? Competes with Gristedes. What do we have in Manhattan? Okay? Kroger's. This is a great thing. And what they've done is measures to prevent consumers from being gouged on food prices. If you buy food, if I'm a supermarket private and I buy it from a wholesaler, my markup is 30% and no more. So the markup is limited. It's regulated. Regulation is creeping back in to their economy. Now here's one I'm very proud of. Here I am, such as I am, but this is BARYSHNIKOV. And he's got a copy of Obama the Postmodern Coup. This is a very popular book because it's got Obama with the Mussolini salute, and on the back it's got this thing about his job. Obama is programmed to attack Russia. So this is very, very interesting. Here's the flag, Donetskaya Narodnaya Respublika. And these are two guys who were part of the tour. This was organized by Europa Objektiv. And the work, they said, get yourself to Moscow and we'll take you on a little on a little tour. So that's Boris Litvinov, and he is the economic genius behind a lot of these reforms. Now, he's even more than that. He's the Thomas Jefferson of his country because he wrote the Declaration of Independence. In that night of the 6th to the 7th of April, they had a committee, but he's the guy who had to stay up all night and actually prepare the final text. Now, if you look at Wikipedia, it says, the Declaration of Independence of the Donetskaya Narodnaya Respublika was carried out by a group of masked men wearing ski masks. No, it was done by a guy we've just seen, a government official in a business suit, bureaucrat if you want, but certainly not an armed goon. And he, as he told us, he said he studied all the cases, including the American one, and he looked at relevant compendia of international law to try to make this as legally perfect as he could. So you walk into his office, and he says, look, couple of ground rules here, friends. We reject the national fascism of Kiev. We reject neoliberalism. How about them apples? We reject oligarchy. Now, if you heard Putin say this, Putin has never come anywhere near this. We reject neoliberalism, oligarchy. These people are beyond Putin, right? They're out in front on Putin. We want a social state. And again, as I pointed out, he's got a couple of think tanks in Moscow that are helping him out. Now, a couple of little anecdotes. He says, we have all this coal, right? We're one of the biggest coal-producing areas in the world. Royal Dutch Shell came to us and said, we want to buy your coal, the coal fields. The answer was, niet. Then Hunter Biden, the son of our vice president, who's got a tremendous conflict of interest. He works for a Kiev corporation. Hunter Biden came in and said, we want control of your coal fields. Answer again, niet. Isn't this refreshing? Isn't this the world that we'd like to live in, where little countries refuse to knuckle under? And how about this one? At the end of the Soviet era, the population of Donetsk Oblast, now I'm leaving out Lugansk simply because I know less about it, haven't been there, haven't really talked to their officials, but it's similar. Population was 5 million in 1991. It was down to 4 million at the time of the Troubles beginning, because they'd had a color revolution. They had the Orange Revolution already in 2004. Many refugees are returning, but many not. So he said, look, we want to encourage family formation with tax breaks, subsidies, prenatal care, you name it, because the hope is 3 children per family. Now I submit to you, we are decades deep in Malthusianism, pessimism, zero growth, people pollute, I hate humanity, cancer of the planet is human. No. This is a stunning clarion call to say, no, human life and human society are valid, and we want to put investments into it. That's Litvinov. Now, what is the face of revolution in our time? Let's ponder the question of revolution, because that's really on the agenda here at our forum, right? Is it the Russell Brand type of systemopathic individual? In other words, is the negation of the negation truly a self-subsisting positive? I think maybe not. And here he is, of course, he's enraged, but he's cool, right? All the New Statesman, the London Guardian, all the networks are telling me, the late night cable guys are telling me, this is cool, this is the revolution. Or is it Boris Litvinov, a government official? He usually has a nice white shirt, a tie, and a jacket if it's the right season. So who's the revolution here? And who's the counter-revolution? Who is the cynical demagogue hoped up by zombie bankers and parasites and derivative speculators to tell you, I mean, this guy has nationalized the whole banking system. He's practically nationalized coal, electricity, railroads. He told you not to vote. What else did he do? Anything of no? Anything else from Russell Brand?
Labour Party went after.
Oh yeah, the kiss of death for Miliband and the Labour Party. So you get the idea. So speaking of coal, I know a lot of people don't like coal, but I'm sorry, all due respect to these issues, but in many ways they need it. So their goal, and this is very important, every country should do this, you have to be the world leader in something. So they've decided to become the world leader in machine tools for coal mining technology. And the Chinese and the Vietnamese are lining up to buy their products. And then they've talked about the need. They've had a lot of their rolling stock, a lot of their gondola cars and other railroad equipment have been destroyed. They've got to restore that as fast as they can. And you pick up a newspaper or a poster. I'm going to try some of my dubious Russian. It says, "Будет igol." There will be coal. And that's the lifeline of the country, right? They can get through, they must get through, they will get through. So this is being prepared, and they're awaiting these economic policy documents. In other words, they want to put it all into one piece of paper for it to happen. Now here's the head of state, right? Donetsk People's Republic president, in effect, head of state, Zakharchenko. Who's he? Does he come from Goldman Sachs? Or is it Morgan Stanley? Where does he come from? City of London? Canary Wharf? No. He's an electrician who worked in a coal mine. An electrician who worked in a coal mine is the president of the country. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? We're going to have an international network of electrical engineers and electrical experts to get in touch with him and encourage him. He was also wounded in action. Somehow he got close enough to the front that he got wounded. And his slogan right now these days is, "Back to the state." Now, it's clear that they're in a very interesting position. They're not in the International Monetary Fund. They're not in the European Union. They don't have the European Central Bank. They don't have the World Trade Organization. They don't have any of that. And look what they're doing. They're going great guns, I would say. Now, here's a branch of the Kolomoisky Bank. And those people are getting their pensions, courtesy of the oligarch Kolomoisky. This is an Italian movie maker. So he's in there, talking. He's gabbing and schmoozing with all the people. That's the A-Bank. That's Kolomoisky. Nationalized, and they're paying their salary. They're paying their pensions, at least. Now, any libertarians lurking here, we didn't forget you. Here's what Litvinov showed me. The new monetary unit, or currency token, znak, snak, the snak. So it's the usual St. George and the Dragon, which is very popular. And this is 100, we're not sure what, but that's the unit. And so they've got a central bank operation going. They have seized economic sovereignty. And there's the back. You get the idea here, too. Huh? The Donetsk People's Republic. Now, a couple of other things. This is Professor BARYSHNIKOV. This is a scholar. He was, for 3 or 4 months, the rector, that is the top boss of the Donetsk University. He was somehow ousted in some fight because he said that he wanted them all to show up on time and they didn't want to do it. He didn't like the fact that so many people on the faculty had sat out the revolution, right, took no part, stayed undercover. Anyway, he's got quite an analysis. Let's see if we have this written up. Yes, we do. The BARYSHNIKOV analysis. Now, if there are any sociologists here who would like to save the honor of their profession, there are a lot of sociologists running around here, right? Professor Aronowitz, of course, distinguished sociologist, and many others, right? I've been coming to these things since 1969, on and off. In 69, they had it at Delphi. Anybody go back that far? Anyway, I do. All right. First thing he tells you, the mass strike process in the East Ukraine is a new phenomenon. As he said, this cannot be comprehended from the point of view of most sociological schools that exist today. It is a middle-class revolution, a middle-class revolution to block the extension of this Maidan. I'm sorry, I got a typo. Maidan Nazis. They did not want to be under what turned out to be the current government. Of course, the current government is led by President Poroshenko. We call him Poroshenko because his policies are obscene. It's a little bit like Crazy Eddie, right? His prices were insane. In this case, Poroshenko's policies are obscene. So, who took part? This is very interesting. The young, retirees, and anybody unemployed. I think that may be the demographic in here. I think we're heavily loaded towards old, retirees, young students, others, but then that area of 30 to 55 or 60, he said they took no part. They kept their heads down. He quoted Chekhov. He said, Chekhov reminds us that the intelligentsia wait until the winner is clear and then they try to join the winning side. But look at this. This is, the reason I want to really stress these things is this has got to be a guide for us. We want to organize something revolutionary here. We got to learn from recent events in very advanced countries. And this is an area of industrial, working class, highly intelligent people. The west of Ukraine, my understanding of it is, the people in West Ukraine are a little bit dumb, right? Around Lvov, Lviv, Lemberg, right? This place. They're dumb because they're all peasants. So they don't have that intelligence of an urban industrial working class. But Donetsk does. That's the difference, right? That's why there is the other things too. But now, the 30 to 60 age cohort was less involved. And the established intellectuals were useless, as he said. They were useless. Who could that mean in our conditions here today? Could it mean GNOME? Could it mean certain broadcasters who have become millionaires, either with their superficial movies or maybe by looting the Pacifica broadcasting system or something like that? Come to me later, I'll tell you who we mean. We don't want to cause a furor here. But the existing intellectuals were useless. The party of the regions. Now, the party of the regions was supposed to be the Yanukovych party, right? So you had all those fascist parties from Lvov in the west of Ukraine. But then you had the party of regions, Yanukovych. They were useless. As he said, we went to them, we tried to get them to declare independence, and they would not do it. They wouldn't vote it. They could have voted it in the parliament, right? Like the state legislature of the oblast, over the 5 or 6 million people. They wouldn't do it. So the party of regions was useless. And I think this analysis, which I'm trying to get him to write, would have lots of implications for future developments in our own country. Now let's get a little flavor of what it looks like. Here we go. The 11th of May, the day of the Republic, Dzień Respubliki. And here we are. This is Lenin Square. And of course, since it's Lenin Square, a statue of Lenin cannot be far away. So we're out there. Now this is the wonderful atmosphere of people who say, we have survived 1 year of hell. These are middle-class people. They're not military. Most of them didn't have guns. They had no idea how to do this. They held off the remains of the Ukrainian army and these fascist goon squads, right? The right sector, Muzichka, Yarosh, Chanibok, and so forth. There are people in the government in Kiev today who appear as textbook examples of neo-fascists in textbooks that are being used in Europe down to the present time. So unfortunately, my poor camera was not enough. But this is, you got to imagine this parade going on for about 2 hours. And they went through all the different towns. Every town had the boosters out there. But not only, they had the occupational groups. So the Day of the Republic starts off with coal miners, metal workers, electrical workers, railroad workers. Then came the machine tool builders, right? The tool and die people. And at this point, I was thinking, if I was live tweeting this, by the way. Go to Webster G. Tarpley Twitter, I think it is. Webster G. Tarpley Twitter. go back to May 11th. I did 25 tweets. I live tweeted this thing. I was the only news coverage in the Western world because there were people from Moscow there. It was all over the Moscow Evening News. But as far as the Western world was concerned, they were relying on me. So I hope you go back and look at that. But then I imagined if I say the machine tool builders are next, I heard the little voice, what's a machine tool? So then we had the teachers, the medical workers. And you compare that. Look, when have you ever seen any of those people on TV? Or a kind word about them? Or anything good? Compare it to the glorification of parasites and sociopaths. Not only in the Republican Party presidential field, but you get the idea. And at the end, they actually had a pretty good balloon launch. Not as good as the Republicans, but they had some balloons, right? And here they go off in there. Now, here's another one. This is funny. The Russians, of course, from nearby Russian cities, they had sent a truckload of free ice cream for the people. And this is done by a group called Polite People. Don't ask me why. It's called Polite People. So here's a guy from the Polite People. And he says, hey, come and help us hand out these ice cream pieces. And I quickly thought, aha, Newland had cake. I have ice cream. I will outdo Newland. And I did. Unfortunately, I was so wrapped up. And then as soon as you had this, these kids came, of course, and they wanted the ice cream. So I had no time to set myself up. But I think some picture of this will be forthcoming. And here are two very nice young ladies from the area eating the good Russian ice cream. But this was the idea. We have survived. We've gone through 1 year of combat, one hot summer, one long winter, and it's been brutal. But now they sort of came out, right? They all came out, and they were all saying the city has far more people than we ever thought, because a lot of these people had just gone underground. Now, these two, this is May 11th. 9 days earlier, they had been visiting the part of town where you're close to the fighting front. Donetsk, city of 1 million people in the old days, right? There's no Hickburg. And then they have the neighborhood in the northwest corner, Oktyabrskaya, the October Revolution part of town. And then there's also Spartak, right? Spartacus, the slave, the rebellious guy from the Roman Empire. So they were taking another group, this time Vietnamese, around this place. The Kiev people saw them and started firing, including with these 150 millimeter cannon. And I'm not kidding. This is big stuff. And some rocket launchers. They had to run into the bunker in these buildings where these old people, old men and old women and sick people live. So they're celebrating because they've survived. So it's middle class people, and they're not controlled by Putin. Now, I guess that's the conclusion of this part, right? If we wanted to take just a minute, are there any questions about this? I want to stress this. I put this here at the beginning because this defines the world in a way that most people don't know. I mean, there are 300 million people out here in this continent who have no inkling that this is going on, right? They have no idea. And it's a very advanced form. Does this mean that if countries in certain parts of the world begin to collapse, that they'll assert their own survival by dumping globalization, dumping the IMF, dumping the central banks, dumping the World Trade Organization, and asserting, in this case, a socialist heritage, which they have? And of course, what we've seen here is there's not really very much of socialism in it. I mean, there's some elements, but it's something in that direction. So they have something to fall back on, right? What does the rotten West have?
I just had a chronological question. So this was the Day of the Republic. This past
May 11th.
Anniversary of
First anniversary. First anniversary of the declaration of the referendum winning, right? Winning about 75 to 80% of the total, registered voters of the area. This is the hot story. Yes.
I guess I have a concern because you were talking earlier on about how they're developing
No.
Because
No.
that's what I find that very, quite frankly, disturbing. And because I wonder, like, where's going to be ahead for them. And,
They would respond, I'm sure, that that is their survival, and also that they may not share this view. In other words, they may not be adherents of the so-called global warming, climate change, carbon theory.
you don't think that they're,
I think they would say that's an imperialist lie designed to destroy us. That might be what some of them would say. That's a big bunch of imperialist baloney that's here to strangle our existence. Now, we can't go into this one, right? We can't solve that here. But you get the idea. In other words, out in the world, it's seen in a very different way.
because I just find, anyway, not to get on.
I knew this would disturb some people, right? But they would say it's either that or the Kiev people will come here and kill us. So what should we do?
Yeah, also my other question was, how is this all working with the TPP and all that stuff going on?
This is totally outside of that, right? This is outside of the European Union, they would say, and they are looking towards Putin's Eurasian Union, but they're not in that yet. So they're essentially in the area of total freedom to do whatever they want. They're one of the few places in the world, and look what they do. I think they've done some pretty good things. As by the way, I was leaving town the last time, right? It must have been the 12th. It was the day after this. So you're heading back on this shell-shocked, pockmarked road to the Russian border. The bus is fine. The bus is probably a Mercedes-Benz, but then you're boom, boom, boom. It's like, you're getting shaken up. This road is so bad that you have to go all the way to the other side of the road sometimes to avoid what seem to be craters or just roads, right? There's a debate about, is it the Ukrainian roads were always that bad? So you're going back. But anyway, they have a bunch of billboards, and it says, it's hard to translate, we've only just begun, or this is only the beginning. So they show state-owned supermarkets with good prices. They show you a modern bus terminal. Yes, a modern bus terminal is something worth having. And some medical facilities. And I looked for this on the internet. I just couldn't quite find it. But they're proud of their achievements in terms of the first year of independence. Despite the war, they have fought their way through. Okay, so we can certainly take that up later. Now, back to the United States. So what we're saying is the mass strike is abroad in the world, and I really think it is. Now, here in the United States, what's the danger? It is what was referred to before, the permanent austerity dictatorship. Now, we have the control of the Congress is now in the hands of the Republican Party. Boehner and Mitch, the Mitch and Boehner show. It means, of course, Koch and Koch, I guess I should say.
Koch Industries.
Mayor Koch of New York would not agree. I mean, if anybody was going to put on airs, it would have been old Ed Koch. He didn't do it. So now they have the Congress. Now, we have the quasi-control of the Supreme Court by means of the infamous rats cabal, Roberts, Alito, Thomas, and Scalia, plus Kennedy. And by the way, they're going to be heard from in June. You know this, right? There's that something or other versus Burwell. The case is going to be, can you get a subsidy for Obamacare in a state that does not have an exchange, which is 36 reactionary states, right? And if they say, we're striking down Obamacare, that's the declaration of war for the permanent austerity dictatorship. So this is coming at you very fast and very soon. So that's probably the middle to end of June, right, when they deliver the opinions for the current session. Now, suppose you then get control of the presidency by the Koch candidate, say the fascist scoundrel Governor Walker of Wisconsin, the famous Union Buster. This is already then a dictatorship. Hitler took power through largely legal means, And indeed, the final phase of actually assuming total power, there were some illegalities, like when he purged the parliament of all the communists, but that would not have stopped him. He did it anyway. So look, what would be the program of instituting a dictatorship here under quasi-legal means? Well, wipe out the trade unions through various legal opinions. You can always manufacture them. Wipe out other mass organizations. There are some. And wipe out the state and local democratic machines. This is largely done through FBI sting, FBI entrapment, stuff like that. Harrison Williams of New Jersey, maybe you remember him. The FBI brought in some absurd character dressed up as a sheik from the Middle East, and he said, I want you to pass some law, and here's the money. And Harrison Williams said, no, 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 and was hounded out of the Congress anyway. So what they're aiming at is the complete atomization of the U.S. population. Notice that the libertarian program of the Paul-Tard dynasty goes exactly towards this, right? Make every state a right-to-work state, right? Destroy every union. And then we get the restriction of the franchise. There'll be no votes, or very hard to vote, let's say, for black, poor, Latino, college students, and on. You can multiply other groups.
They already do that when they arrest people.
Sure, absolutely.
Once you become incarcerated, you're disenfranchised.
That's right.
One could argue that that's already happening.
Yeah.
Of course. Well, no, I'm not. You know, this is no news to a lot of people. But if you see the way the package fits together, I think it becomes even scarier. And then we have vote fraud, right? In Ohio, Bob Petrakis was here last year. I hope he's here again this year.
Bob Petrakis is in my panel this year, tomorrow from 3:40 to 5:30.
All right, good. That's certainly worth hearing, because that's where you want to go to learn how to fight vote fraud.
Simon and Mark Crispin Miller.
Please tell him that I plugged him.
And I have a flyer about it. It's on page 71.
Good.
Computerized vote theft. We call it vote theft because, you know, the Republicans like to talk about vote fraud.
Well, they say voter fraud, but I say vote fraud. Anyway, vote theft is good too.
Page 71, please.
Now look, there's all, and indeed, go to that again. You want to say that again for people to write it down?
Yeah,
You
tomorrow-
should go to Petrakis.
Tomorrow, Bob Petrakis in room 1.107, page 71, computerized vote theft and the subversion of democracy. And he has
What time?
It's 3:40, the last session, and he has a 7 o'clock plane, so he's going to be speaking first. And Jonathan.
Okay,
Simon-
go and listen to Bob, and then come to the other
and then
panel where
Jonathan
I'll be.
Simon, who wrote the book, Code Red,
Okay,
and Mark Crispin Miller.
he's a fine guy. I knew him. We were here in 1992 when Clinton was nominated. Petrakis and we went to federal court to try to get the Democratic Party to vote an anti-death penalty resolution. We wanted to embarrass Clinton because Clinton had already started executing people as part of his campaign. That should have been enough. Now, the top ideologue, or a top ideologue of the permanent austerity dictatorship has now emerged as Charles Murray. And I want to thank the people at Think Progress for putting this picture together, right, assembling the concept. You will remember the racist ideologue, Charles Murray. This is the bell curve.
Right.
Black genetic inferiority. I don't think anything much needs to be added, except when you ask for whom the bell curves, it curves for thee. In other words, once this starts, they're coming after you. So, and indeed, here he is right away. This is a book called Losing Ground, which says that the white working class is also degenerate. They're no good. The only thing that is any good is the country club people. So we have to kowtow to them. Now, the current book is Koch money from Koch, and small business obstructionism. In other words, he says, we've lost our liberty because of too much government regulation. Yeah, there are arguments to be made, but not what he wants here. He says, we got to get back to total deregulation and indeed destroy and bankrupt and demoralize these regulatory agencies. So he's got a line of a human wave of enraged small businessmen. That sounds a little bit like fascist movements in Central Europe between the two world wars. Human wave of enraged small businessmen, and behind them is Koch money to fund an endless series of lawsuits to tie up every regulatory agency so they're just overwhelmed. So that's another feature of it. this is the book, By the People, Rebuilding Liberty Without Permission. What he means by this is we're going to do this from the top down, right? We are these characters, right? Koch. Okay, now, brand X alternatives to the Tax Wall Street Party in or around the Democratic Party, but not only. Bernie Sanders, the F-35 socialist. The F-35, of course, is built in Vermont. Now, I'm not automatically against this stuff, but if you notice Bernie, he has a, he tries to have a populist economic pattern going on, right? But the anti-war side seems to be a little bit underrepresented, and I think this is one of its big problems. The F-35 is built in Vermont, and to some extent, he is a creature of the industrial military complex just as much as somebody from like South Dakota is going to be a creature of Citibank because that's who dominates the state. He's not a baby boomer. He represents the silent generation. In other words, he's even older. So I call him the voice of the silent generation. And some have invited the silent generation to butt out. They've never had a president. They're still trying with Bernie. Now, very strange stuff about Bernie, that he was the sex columnist in a newspaper called the Freeman of Vermont. So look, this was hard to present this. Let me see if I can fix it a little bit. Here we go. Here's the column by Bernie Sanders back in 1972, right? Mid-February 1972. Man and Woman by Bernie Sanders. And he's got, I don't even want to read this. Probably you can see enough, right? It's scurrilous and scabrous and prurient. So he's what can we say? A woman enjoys intercourse with her man as she fantasizes about being raped. I mean, it's really awful. So that's Bernie. Now, since he declared for president, this stuff has been dredged up. I'm warning you now because the Republicans will have this stuff, right? Karl Rove has got this already. So that was published. This column was brought to our attention by Mother Jones magazine, right? So the leftists at Mother Jones are telling us this stuff. And now Salon magazine has gone bonkers because they say this should not have been exposed. So Salon does a satire, Bernie Sanders exposed, a shocking look at his views on rape and violence against women. And they're trying to be ironic now, right? It's all very arch. Some people in conservative media, like Bill Kristol and Eric Erickson, right? The Weekly Standard and Red States, are very concerned about what it means about Sanders and rape and all this other stuff. So in other words, one left-wing organ has come out with a story, and the other one is saying you should not have done that because you're helping Bill Kristol and Eric Erickson. But what it shows is that the Bernie Sanders you think you know is maybe not the Bernie Sanders. Now let's go more substantively. Let's see. Here's Counterpunch. You know them, right? They're anti-intelligence community and so forth. Useful contributions. So here we are back in September, October 2011. Bait and switch. The myth of Bernie Sanders. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders has recently been elevated to near godlike status by the political left in the U.S. Some of his fans have suggested that he should challenge Barack Obama, this was the previous time around, in the Democratic primary. The more often he's accused of being a socialist by his political enemies on the right, the more convinced the left becomes that he surely walks on water. Because I'm afraid his socialist credentials are somewhat in doubt. This is, once again, Counterpunch. They say that Sanders is the darling of AIPAC, American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, and the right-wing Likud government of Israel. Now, they don't give too much in specifics, but He keeps the myth of Islamic terrorism alive. Well, you can see that in a number of ways. He never questions the U.S. government's unconditional support of Israeli acts of genocide and ethnic cleansing against the Palestinians. So that's, again, counterpunch, right? I'm simply bringing this up. Man and woman. So here it is. They like him. However, and I think this is now the, if we could just go to the full screen. Sanders may have been a socialist back in the 1980s when he was mayor of Burlington. Today, a socialist he is not. Rather, he behaves more like a techno-fascist. Now, that's pretty strong. I don't know about that. Disguised as a liberal who backs all of Obama's nasty little wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Pakistan, Somalia, and Yemen. He always supports the troops by voting for the defense spending bill and supports all military contractors who bring much-needed jobs to Vermont. And Mother Jones adds, he has always supported the F-35 Lockheed Martin fighter, problematic, hundreds of billions of dollars in cost overruns, which just so happens to be manufactured in Vermont. So I think it's, the issue I think is this. When I was writing, I wrote 2 books trying to warn people against Obama and what the problems were there. It turned out that in the Obama era, there were people who wanted to be duped. They were hungry to be duped. They said essentially the emotional satisfaction of being duped is so overwhelming for me that I don't care what happens, right? There's no tomorrow, right? Carpe diem, let's all get duped. So now I just wanted, do you want to go from being a dupe of Obama to being a dupe of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, right? Elizabeth Warren, long on rhetoric, short on specifics. My view of Elizabeth Warren is that she does not approach this question as actual economics. It's good government. It's clean government that she wants, all right? If you say to her, organize an economic recovery or 30 million new jobs, this is not her world, right? You could say, fight the corruption of the banking system and too many Wall Street people in government. Yeah, that I suppose. The best thing she ever did was this, and I'm citing this because I didn't start with any animus against her at all. In May of 2013, she proposed 0.75 student loan rate through the discount window of the Federal Reserve. And I fell all over myself trying to support this. I mobilized myself. I called everybody I knew. I said, we got to get out there. We got to mobilize. We got to go to the campuses. We got to get people to support this before the kids go home. She chose the time when it was too late already. Because this is via the discount window of the Federal Reserve. And the argument was, if you're a zombie banker, you can get 0.75 through the Fed discount window. If you're a student, you're going to be paying 10%. What is this? Let's have 0.75. So this was the first time an elected official of any note had proposed coercing the Federal Reserve to serve the national interest in my time. This was a great thing. And she repudiated it. Within a couple of months, the Democratic Party had said, listen, lady, nix. So the Democratic Party pressured her to revert to their plan, which was a 3.5% rate using borrowed money and Chinese money and all the rest. So all I can say is this is not exactly a profile in courage, would you say? So I think we have to look further. And let's see what we have left here. I think we're fine. We're backward. So here's my proposal. What's obviously going to be needed, right? We can imagine Hillary Clinton as a big wheel, I guess, a big gear, a big wheel. Imagine these as these, wheels with teeth on them, right? Cogs. Next to her, Hillary is going to be up there at about $1 billion. Next to her is Bernie, who's going to be up there at 50 million, he hopes. I think there's room for a somewhat smaller wheel with more modest resources. And if Bernie is supposed to keep Hillary honest and hold her feet to the fire, and perhaps it's not altogether extravagant to suppose that that tiny little wheel all the way out there could exert a similar influence on Bernie. As you see with Bernie, there's a lot of work to be done, right, in terms of all sorts of things, exposure, whatever you want, and indeed compete with Bernie. So it seems to me that the Tax Wall Street Party ought to look at the possibility of fielding an effort in that area to try to exert a kind of mediated pressure on this entire Democratic Party scene by constantly injecting the elements of program which they don't have and they don't want to have, right? The reason that Occupy Wall Street was not allowed to have any demands was that any demand would be an embarrassment to the Democratic Party. So it seems to me that there's a lot of work to be done there. I urge everybody, subscribe to our daily briefing, morning briefing. Keep up with us. Tarpley.net, the other ones, you see them listed here. Follow us. We will be launching candidacies, right? There are any number of senatorial races that we're going to be intervening in. And we urge you to prepare yourself emotionally for such stuff, to participate yourselves, right? This can often be a good thing for you personally, even as you're doing something good for the world. But the Tax Wall Street Party will intervene in the presidential contest in some way, and we're developing how. So please orient yourself towards us, because we want your cooperation, and we'd love to have you as part of our network. And remember also, this is not just the U.S. by any stretch, right? This is a worldwide one. We've already broken through in Great Britain, right? We've broken out of the U.S. framework. We do not propose to maintain ourselves within the English language area, not at all, anything but. So we're expanding in all these directions. So please join us, take part, benefit at least from the research and other stuff that we do all the time. And next year, by this time, we'll be in a much more advanced position. So I urge you to follow us and work with us in the meantime, and come back next year, and we'll see you then. Thank you.